National Guard has a huge mystery on its hands, and that is our top story today. During routine photo reconnaissance missions over Oregon, RF-4 jets spotted and took photographs of a huge carving in the desert over 1,000 feet across.
It has everybody talking. I mean, this is just something that, it chills you.
A lot of expertise involved, had to take a long period of time, and maybe a lot of money.
No tire tracks, and no footprints. Whoever carved the Oregon Desert design, whatever carved it, surely wasn't hunting for publicity. It's tucked between twin mountain ranges in one of the more remote corners of the continental U.S.
The precision, size, and anonymous nature of this quarter-mile wide design led to speculation of UFOs or Star Wars technology. Adding to the mystery, the design, known as a Sri Yantra, is a traditional East Indian symbol for the design.
Okay, folks. I want to tell you what I did over Labor Day's weekend. You just saw a little clip of Bill Witherspoon. I don't know how many people ever heard about that, but I read it about him in the Oregonian. Okay, folks. I want to tell you what I did over Labor Day's weekend. You just saw a little clip of Bill Witherspoon. I don't know how many people ever heard about that, but really didn't realize where it was. Okay, I ended up getting a map of the state of Oregon. And you see right here, this is Portland. You see? And over here is Eastern Oregon somewhere. And, well, I had to drive all the way over here to way down at the very bottom corner of, Nevada, Idaho corner, and I didn't think I could, I thought, well, what the hell, I could do it. Labor Day, you can do just about anything, but I didn't realize how long it really took me. Well, let me show you here. I'll draw a map. Got a piece of cardboard here. Let me trace the outline of the state here for you. Here's. Okay. Now here's the ocean, right? Ocean. And here's where we are, Portland. Can you see that? That says Portland. Okay. And over here is Eastern Oregon, Pendleton, the Dalles, and so forth. Well, this is where I really had to go. So, I took a drive, followed the map, then cut off at Albany, took Highway 20 to Sweet Home, and then drove a lot more ways, and I think this is Bend or something. Anyway, here's Albany, Salem's over here, and then all of a sudden, man, I had to go a hell of a long ways to Burns, Oregon. And then I still had to go another 111 miles down to Fields, Oregon, because that's where I had an address. That's where I heard it was on the TV. So I drove all the way down to Fields, and it took me 12 hours, 501.6 miles to get over here. Now here's Portland, here's Fields. Well, I got there in the evening after starting about 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I had to drive along this dirt road, gravel road, 33 miles, you see, to a little oasis here, a little desert, a little flat plain up in the mountains, completely flat, like the Great Salt Lake, you see? I'm kind of coloring it in here. Okay. And what I ended up doing, 501.6 miles was a long ways. I decided to take another route. So when I returned, instead of going to Highway 20 to Bend this way, I went up to 26, to Pendleton or whatever, and, Madras, and so forth. And here's Mount Hood, and there's Portland. Well, I saved about 30, 40 miles this way by returning this way. Now look, this is all freeway. This to here is all mountains. Right from here to here is mountains, Cascades. but it was actually faster and quicker. And I also knew the way. Okay, well, enough of this. I want to show you a little of my journey, a 12-hour journey, and then we'll go and see what I saw there.
It is it.
Hi. Welcome to my nightmare.
It is it.
A far-off journey.
It is it.
Ronnie, 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 working on the time zone, working on the time zone. 20 mutant marksmen, 20 mutant marksmen, working on the time zone, working on the working on the time zone, working on the time zone. 20 mutant marksmen, working on the time zone. Where is you, Ronnie? Where is you, Ronnie? Working on the time zone.
I couldn't do it every day in Portland, but I did. I had a team dinner in Portland. Why am I getting that out in the desert? Extra good day. What am I doing? Let's call it off. As I'm driving. Speed. He's charging away. I'm not a driver. I'm not a driver. I'm just getting there and getting ready. Look at something. Alvord Dessert. I'm almost there. The petrol. What did I say? And I was at the funny farm. Oh, did I say that? Really enormous. And it's been that way all along this journey.
Almost there. You can't give up. We're almost there. I say you really can't give up. You see, there's another car up ahead that I'm following. I can't give up. Oh, stoplight, here we go. It's the end. It's the end. We're here. We're here. We're here. Oh boy. Here we go.
A tetrad is kind of the basic building block of early Greek mathematics and geometry and even philosophy. And what that is it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. It's a triangle.
Right.
A pure form which has all the 10 elements in it. All sorts of things were derived out of that and computed out of that, and there are 6 of those present there. that are in the center that are actually delineating the other geometries. See, the whole thing is based, there are no lines. I mean, you look at it, oh, there's these lines, but there aren't, the lines are gaps. The whole geometry of the design is produced through gaps, really through emptiness. These pairs of poles that are 1 meter apart, they delineate a space. And it's that space that creates the geometry. And as you come into the center, if you come in, it depends on which ray you come in, but if you come in one of the rays, for example, you get to a pole which blocks your progress, but then the same 1 meter wide channel goes this way, and it goes this way. And in fact, it connects over here. So there's a triangle there. And then if you were to come in from the opposite one, you'd come in out here, you'd have the same experience, and you'd see, there's a channel going here and here, and actually that connection can't tell that. And then there's a circle around through here, and then, so all of that is, and there's a hexagonal form on the interior, and then the inner circle. That's the principal design. Then 15 degrees shifted is another whole design, in a sense, which is these wires. Those are, there are 12 of those. There are 12 rays, and then there are 12 of these wires. And the 12 wires are offset 15 degrees. So they're every 30 degrees also, but offset. So there's actually a lot. There's the golden mean is expressed in there, in the center. Through the there's a sine curve. I don't know if you noticed, very subtle. The tops of
right. We did notice.
Yeah, and that produces a ratio of 5 and 8, which generates the golden mean.
What's the thing about the golden mean again?
Oh, it's the root of the Fibonacci series. It's a proportion that the Greeks were very, very fond of.
I thought that was a perfect proportion.
Yeah, and it comes from geometric construction and certain mathematical series. And then the rays themselves have, as you move down, you probably notice not only do they go up and then swoop and then kind of crescendo in the center in terms of height, but also there's a change in terms of their frequency. So as you move towards the center, they get closer and closer and closer, and that whole thing is an arithmetic sequence until you get to about 12 or 13 poles from the center, where the thing starts to shoot up, and then it becomes a geometric sequence. Then it accelerates. Their closeness accelerates down to the point where they're 1 meter apart.
I didn't appreciate it in terms of the intervals, geometry of it. For me, it was just aesthetic. There was like, when you said intensity, it was like there was a rushing movement toward the center.
Yeah, right.
I
good.
felt that.
Yeah, good. Well, that's good, and I'm glad you felt it. I went through there. There was some people here when we completed it back almost a month ago. Completed the majority of the construction, and some Native American people came. Somebody had a drum, and I started out at one end of the ray with this drum, just on a whim, I just thought. And every time I'd walk by, I just walked at a steady speed. Every time I'd walk by a pole, I'd bang the drum. And it just got faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. Bum, 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 bum. It was really fun. It was just fun to kind of experience it that way as well.
How did they experience it, the Indians?
Well, that was quite an extraordinary experience for all of us that were here. The fellow who came, his name is Little Leaf. He's actually from Portland, and he's half Blackfoot and half Warm Spring. And I had met him. I gave some lectures in Portland, and I had met him, and he came, and we talked afterwards, and we had a lot to talk about. And then I invited him to come down at the end, at the completion. And the reason I did that was because I felt that he understood my intentions very clearly. And in fact, his culture, one could say, understood or understands my intentions. And my intentions, put in very simple words, were to honor and enliven deep laws of nature. And that's something that Native American people have been doing. In fact, they have developed that in their past to really a technology. That's how it is that the Hopi could grow corn in the Southwest. They knew the laws of nature that were involved, and they knew how to honor and, consequently, subsequently, enliven those laws of nature, so that corn would grow, rain would fall, everything would be appropriate in order for them to exist. So that was a technology. So I had people come who I felt had a cultural tradition for honoring and enlivening laws of nature, and asked them to do whatever they wanted to do, whatever they felt was appropriate at this point, you know, to kind of celebrate the completion of this. So it's sort of like an overlay of different people. And there was a family from Sri Lanka who are part of the Vedic tradition and who did a number of specific ancient ceremonies to do exactly that. And there was a musician, a bagpiper from a Celtic musician, you know, who again did the exact same thing. It totally fit perfectly. He understood exactly what it was all about. And it was gorgeous to have these, at night, full moon, and these bagpipes moving in and circling through the design. No one could see the bagpipes, just this you know, beautiful
Bagpipes are a wonderful
sound. Oh, yeah.
Haunting.
Yeah, exactly. It fit perfectly. So, but to go back, Little Leaf came and he set up, first thing he did, he set up a big ceremonial teepee, which was a teepee that had belonged to him, I think he said, for 13 years. Beautiful hand-painted teepee. And then he kind of proceeded and invited us to come to in the morning, early morning, to a pipe ceremony. And he brought out a pipe that he'd made specially for the occasion, hand carved out of this pipe stone. Beautiful thing, beautiful pipe, a thunderbird with and a lot of appropriate symbolism carved into it, long stem, you know, feathers and all. And he kind of walked us through this traditional ceremony. And when he was done, he said, this pipe will be going back with Bill. He gave me this pipe, and which I was quite taken aback. And then the next thing, my 12-year-old son appears with this beautiful neck piece of bone and beads that he gave to my son. And then another day later, he appears with a full vest, leather vest, all covered with beadwork, just gorgeous, beautiful thing, you know, that he'd been given. And then someone with a claw from a bird around his neck, and somebody else with this, and somebody else with that. And and then when Little Leaf left, he came up to me. And the teepee was still up, and it had just been raining a little bit, just a little, and it was a little damp. We didn't want to take it down, you know. And I didn't know he was leaving. He came up to me in the pickup, and he said, I'm going. And he said, I promised Miles, that's my son, a feather. And there's one up there hanging from the tip of one of the teepee poles. And he said the teepee goes with it.
Oh.
And
that's wonderful.
And then and then he goes and sees Miles. Just on his way out, sees Miles. Miles says, well, you're leaving. They had been spending a lot of time. I mean, they had become very close. And he said, yeah. And he said, and Miles said, well, your teepee, it's damp, we can't take it down. We'll take it down and we'll send it to you. He just left. So I got to tell it was a very a beautiful lesson for everybody, what he brought. And it was a lesson in abundance, complete, utter, total abundance. And that is the law of, those are the laws of nature that I was specifically trying to enliven with this geometry. In other words, to go one step further, I would say to honor and enliven deep laws of nature, specifically, in this case, those laws of nature associated with abundance, infinite abundance of nature. And here, the first lesson, I think, that came to us was this abundance of giving that just, had no boundaries. No boundaries whatsoever.
Abundance is not an adjective most people would think of when they look at this landscape. I think my first reaction, coming from the east, was privation.
Yeah, but abundance is appropriate. Look at the space. Enormous abundance of space, almost infinite space out here. Look at the silence, or listen to the silence. A great abundance of silence. Silence isn't the absence of sound. Silence is a positive value, a positive quality. And that's what people have been reporting with respect to this design, that they go in and spend time, some people have spent the night in there and so forth, that there's a deeper, more profound silence there than even somewhere else on the desert. That somehow the silence is concentrated, it's focused, it's lively, it's enlivened. And it's that enlivened silence that is the source of creativity, of intelligence, of energy, of expression, of growth, of manifestation, of this, of that. And that's why I'm interested in going to all the work to do this, to make these things, is to, and to me, it's, I don't know, is it art or is it technology? I kind of like, I mean, I have more training as a scientist than I do as an artist, actually. And probably more years of my life have been spent as a scientist than as an artist. But so I'm looking at technology. I'm looking at this as if it were technology, because it's staring me in the face, not because I'm trying to impose that on it, but because these things happen that cause me to keep making more experiments, so to speak, more of these, build more of these things. So I think of it very much in terms of a technology which may have real value, not just here in the desert, but may have real value for our cities and so forth. I mean, I very much want to make a design, not like this one, but in this direction, in a city, in a park. I mean, we have parks, and why do we have parks? People go to parks to relax. What does that mean, to relax? It means they go to parks to feel a little more closeness with nature. Get out of the house, get off the asphalt, off the concrete, and just get some sense of nature. It's nature there in terms of grass and trees. But what if there were a way of intensifying or amplifying or focusing that experience of nature, so that when a person went into that park, nature hit a little harder? You could be a little duller and still hear her. This is made out of poles. Mm-hmm. So there's no problem with ranchers looking at this. Now, all I'm talking about, I mean, there's a carpenter who's working over here. He has no sophisticated art education or philosophy background. And yet he came out and he said, and he spent a lot of time in this thing, and he sorted through the geometry. He found certain parabolic curves that almost nobody else has observed. And he said, when I'm out in this design, he said lots of, what did he say? He used a funny word. He said dogmas. I'm not sure. Dogmas, which I think of as rigid intellectual concepts, right. Okay? He said dogmas seem to fall off. And I have deeper experience of the world. That was what he said. So
It's nice to see dogmas fall off.
yeah, I mean, if you physically vibrate it, such as with sound, it will produce an electrical current. So that's a transducer. It can take energy in one form and produce it and manifest it in another, or in that other and manifest it and receives it. So it goes back and forth. A loudspeaker is another example of a transducer. So the idea was, could we build a huge transducer which would give us an insight into nature's language? So that's where we are right now. We've got her built, and I go down there and I sit and I listen for patterns. But my mind is subtle, but it doesn't retain in the same way that a computer technology can retain. And I've heard a lot of things that I have absolutely no explanation for. I can't explain them. I've heard things that to me are exquisitely beautiful, and to me the word beautiful is almost synonymous with the word true or truth, like as Keats, beauty is truth.
Beauty.
Yeah, right, you know that one. So when I have that experience of something being extremely beautiful, and I know that experience, something, then I know there's truth there also. So some of these patterns and things that I've been hearing suggest.
You were talking about the Vedas a little while ago.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about the Vedas, but isn't there something in there about the roar of nature,
The sound.
the sounds?
Oh, that whole Vedic civilization.
I mean,
is
man
totally
try to
based on-
imitate the sound, bring out sounds which resonate.
Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, what you're talking about is Sanskrit, which is the language of the Veda. There is a principle there of name and form. And the principle is that the form of an object corresponds to its name, i.e. its sound. So their understanding of the world, and it's just like really, if you look at the Bible, at first there was the Word, and all that sort of thing, is that sound is the most fundamental expression. You have a field, like the unified field, of physics, and it's lively, it's pure potentiality, but it's unmanifest. And it starts, the first manifestation is in terms of sound. So there's a correspondence between sound and form. And the rishis, I think, were of the opinion that when the consciousness of an individual were sufficiently pure and strong, the very recitation or thought, which is a subtle form of sound, of the name could bring about the manifestation of the object. And so Sanskrit is built on that principle of name and form. Shakespeare said a rose by any other name would smell the same. That is a contradiction. That does not apply in that worldview, in the worldview of Sanskrit. A rose by any other name would smell different. It would not be a rose. You call it a pansy, and in fact, it's not a rose. Pansy gives rise to one thing. Rose gives rise to something else. So, from my experience, and that's very much, that understanding is very much integrated into what's going on here and very much integrated with mathematics and geometry. The idea of geometric structures as resonant structures, which they are. What do they resonate with? What sounds will they resonate with? You take a drum head and you put sand on it, and you bring a sound into the environment, and that drum head will vibrate in resonance with that sound, and a pattern will appear in the sand. And you change the sound and the pattern changes. So there's a correspondence between sound and geometry. And geometry, I believe, is a way of enlivening very fundamental laws of nature. Probably the link is through sound. So that's why you can make something like this and it'll produce an influence. The first design I made, which was a small one, about 60 yards across, I made it around my bus. I was living somewhere quite a ways from here. And I'd lived in that same spot for 6 months the year before, and during that period of time I saw 4 animals, which was par for the course. You know, kangaroo rats, that was it. A couple of birds. After I made this design around the bus, within 2 months there were probably 300 animals that come in.
So it was resonating.
Something, and that's what kind of really started me going on these things when I saw that. And these were like kit foxes, very shy animal, would come in and lie down and nap next to my bus in the afternoon. Totally bizarre behavior. And antelope would come in just as close as almost as close as we are. I mean, as close as you are, you know. So water ouzels, their nearest habitat was 40 miles away. They would come down, hop around on the rocks and stuff. So that made me realize that this geometry, and these animals couldn't see the whole. It was not an aesthetic or visual experience. They couldn't see it. It was all down hidden in the sagebrush. In fact, it still hasn't been found because it's well camouflaged. So I made another one that was a duplicate of it in a gallery back in the Midwest. And then I watched people for 3 weeks. And sure enough, their behavior changed, and in a very positive kind of way. And then I started doing research. I went to some big university libraries and started looking and studying and reading everything I could find. Spent several months just doing that. And then I made a Sri Yantra, which is a very beautiful design that comes from the Himalayas and very old. I mean, maybe 5,000 to 6,000 years old. No sense of how it originated anywhere in the literature. And that had a profound influence on me when I made it. And then I thought, whoa, what if I made it so big I could live in the middle? And to live in the middle, the center of it is called a bindu, it's a circle. I figured I'd need about 10 feet. So that required it to be a quarter of a mile across. And I knew the place to put it. So I went and put it there and then lived in it. And then left. And then it got discovered.
How did they ever find out that you had done it?
I came forth and told them.
Oh.
Because
it was getting kind of out of hand.
It was out of hand. They were saying it was a cult and that it was some negative thing. And when I heard that, I said, no, you can't. I didn't want to. I was happy to be anonymous, but I didn't want misunderstanding about something because that design is an exquisitely beautiful expression of very deep laws of nature. Just the furthest thing from negative ugliness, you know. It's full of beauty, full of truth. So I wanted people to know properly. You know, I didn't want it. I don't like ignorance. So I.
Yeah, that was getting out of hand, as I remember.
Yeah.
So you're almost completed now.
Yeah, I just have 2 more rays to rake. You probably noticed the ones you walk down, maybe they hadn't been raked out.
And then you...
Yeah. I had a neurophysiologist come out with EEG equipment, portable EEG equipment, which monitors brainwave pattern. And this was stuff, it's really the high-tech stuff. I mean, literally the whole thing was on a person's belt, and then they had 16 electrodes going into the scalp. And each person, there were 8 subjects, and they had it on for 24 hours, and then off, and then on for another 24 hours. And the first 24 hours was out of the design, and the second 24 hours was in. And they were working, eating, sleeping, meditating, if they happened to do that. Whatever they were doing was in the design or out of the design. And what we were looking for was not so much, you know, alpha, delta, theta wave, but coherence. Because it turns out that coherence between frontal and rear and between side to side is probably more indicative of certain positive changes in consciousness than even a particular wave. So that's kind of what they're looking at. We haven't yet processed it. That's another big kind of a bill that we have to pay yet to run the stuff through the computers and process the tapes. But it's a start. And we did it because we expected that having heard so many subjective reports from so many people, that we probably would see some trend, some direction. And it makes sense to me to think that if there is in fact a valid subjective response, which is not just mood making or intellectualizing, that it will be reflected in the physiology. So I think it's kind of a neat, you were talking earlier about some guy in politics who's, I also happen to believe that art is pretty much bankrupted itself. I mean, there's all kinds of things out there that are called art. And I'm curious to see if we could use science as a way to purify or uplift art by seeing what kinds of changes occur in human physiology and really in human consciousness. Some people are scared by that notion, but I'm interested in exploring anything. Not anything that's useful. And I think art should be useful. I think it should ultimately should be useful, and real art, in my opinion, is art which produces a positive, uplifting influence and promotes human evolution, human growth. And there's a lot that is there in the name of art that doesn't do anything, just doesn't do anything, or which does the reverse, which actually degrades human values and obscures nature, obscures the divine. And that I don't consider art either, even if it's artfully done or cleverly done or uses the tools of art. I don't give it. I'm real old-fashioned. I like Keats. Beauty is truth. Truth is beauty. That is all you know on earth and all you need to know. I mean, I don't know. There's other things that can be said, but
is music important too?
Yeah, very important. Yeah, I love music, and some different twist, and I would have been a musician. And now actually I'm going in the direction of music. And music is beautiful to me because sound is such a powerful, it's such a, so I've always been really deeply.
What, any music in particular?
Yeah, pre-Renaissance music, what's early Western music, Indian music, classical Indian music, Gandharva music, and then I love the old ballads, the child ballads. I love early American music. All kinds of funny things.
People who love music do love all kinds of music.
Yeah. Whatever resonates with your soul.
When you were talking about silence as having being a positive quality, I thought Thelonious Monk. He used this. There was intervals between the sound, his touching the piano keys, which had a real body to them.
Yeah, right.
And you didn't know whether it was the sound or the intervals between the sound.
Beautiful. Well, music to me is a way of articulating silence. That's what it's about. It's playing with. It's not the note. It's the silence, and that's what music is about. And music draws me to silence, to the transcendental value of silence, the huge, unbounded, infinite value of silence. And music is a fabulous way because it just takes your attention from the surface and brings you to this very deep level. And when you experience that silence in its fullness and its richness, that, I think, is probably the ultimate human experience, frankly. Unboundedness, infinity, eternality, And when you know that to be yourself, then you're on track.
Did you enjoy the writings of Aldous Huxley? So much of what you say reminds me of Huxley.
I don't think I've ever read them. Maybe I read them way back in the early 60s
his
or
essays.
something.
He had a feel for the desert, the vastness.
Oh, really?
Right, very much. Well, he lived on the edge of the desert.
Oh.
And
I was not aware
the
of
adjective
this.
he used to describe the desert was crystalline.
Yeah, good. It is. It is crystalline. Good adjective. My experience of it is unbounded. That's what I come here for. Is for unboundedness. Just total absence of boundaries. I mean, your attention just lifts, the minute your attention lifts off the horizon, Where does it go? Bango. Infinite.
Yeah.
So what have you got? You've got 2 degrees here of your world, or 5 degrees, or whatever. From these cracks and this little brush, you can lift your attention up a few degrees, and you can have relative, changing, bounded life. And then the instant it pops up, you got almost 170 degrees of unboundedness.
Maybe I haven't been here long enough, but I find it threatening.
That's the first experience.
I live in an 18th century stone house with 2-foot thick stone walls,
All right.
and I'm surrounded by trees, and I like confinement.
Right.
And here it's maybe agoraphobia or something.
Yeah, I met a guy, a very interesting guy, who's an Indian from Klamath, India, who worked down in San Francisco on building skyscrapers, and he walked these beams and put in rivets and stuff like that. There's a name for people, I forget that job, but total exposure on both sides, 70 stories or whatever on either side, and the guy's walking, right, doing his thing. And he was out, I met him out in the desert, and I said, well, we got to talking, and he said he came out to the desert because it made him, the space of the desert produced excitement. It threatened him. And it turned out that it was the horizontality of the whole thing. It was this kind of space. I mean, here's a guy who can do that, which most people would just, the hearing of it would, put cold sweat down him. He could do that, but he'd get out in the desert and he'd get this kind of anxious, this kind of, whoa, wait a minute here. I'm not sure I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
Well, put it this way. As an artist, it's my goal to be completely out of control. Now that doesn't mean out of control like a car that's careening down a highway or something like that. That means to allow nature to be completely in control and to take the limitations of individuality and somehow go beyond those limitations so that decisions or actions aren't the result of limited, bounded needs or desires, but preferably one would have one's action be an expression of nature. One would be responding to nature's needs, not one's own individual needs. And the beauty of that is that the more one goes in that direction, the more one finds that nature's needs are one's own needs, or one's own needs are nature's needs. And that is what, to me, results in real freedom. Real freedom is not what I thought it was when I was a kid, of being able to do whatever I want, you know, whenever I want, go to bed whenever I want, or something like that. Freedom, real freedom for me is action which is totally in accord with the laws of nature. So that every action, every move, every action is an expression of nature's needs. And what happens then, not only are you free, but you have a kind of different status. Instead of having to be concerned all times about making mistakes because everything is being computed by the limitations of the intellect, one gets a kind of freedom, again, a kind of comfort that comes from knowing that one is acting for nature or in tune with nature. And that's the ideal, you know, whether or not, I mean, I can talk about my experience, but ultimately I suppose other people have to kind of get into the loop and evaluate and participate in the judgment, or they want to anyway. But that's the direction I go in, you know. So if you see this as a free expression, I mean, on one level, it's not. It's very clearly bounded. It's filled with mathematical formula and very tight geometries and extreme precision and everything. There's nothing arbitrary. There's not one single arbitrary occurrence in this design, as far as I know. Maybe something, but everything is integrated with everything else. Everything is tied in. Every dimension. I mean, I tell you a great story about that. I organized the dimensions of the rays, and I wanted them to be the poles to be exactly 1 meter apart. That would produce a channel, 1 meter, 12 of these, 1 meter wide channels. I also wanted the design to reproduce itself on the other side of the globe. Actually, I wanted it to reproduce itself 6 times and blanket the whole globe. And it turned out that when you translate from plane geometry into spherical geometry, solid geometry, and I got some mathematicians and computer people to work this out for me because I'm not capable of doing it. What they found was that if I wanted to extend imagine extending certain lines and things around the globe that are generated by the design and reproducing itself on the other side. If I were to do that, then these lines would have to be precisely 1 meter apart. And that's exactly what would happen in the context of, if less than 1 meter it wouldn't work, more than 1 meter it wouldn't work. If they diverged, you know, it wouldn't work. And so what we got in the end was exactly what we wanted, just by kind of letting nature make the decision, you know, just going and functioning from the intuition, and then using the intellect afterwards to kind of check things up, to as a monitor. Man and nature are not separate. Man meaning human beings, and nature are not separate. Our culture, our civilization has led us to the conclusion that we are separate, and more importantly, our behavior and our habits have been cultivated in such a way as to keep us separate, And our intellect functions to keep us separate, but the reality is that there's only one. There's only one. And that's our most essential inner nature. We could call it our nature or nature or mother nature, however. My intention in making this design was to both honor and enliven deep laws of nature. And really the deepest law of nature, if you want, or the source of nature, is silence. I mean, even if you look at it from the point of view of physics, physics talks about a unified field out of which all activity, all events arise. And the other way of talking about that, if you're kind of more coming from the angle of consciousness, is silence. But it isn't, silence isn't absence of noise. It's a very condensed, primordial, pure potentiality which underlies intelligence and creativity and energy and all expressions of life. So if you could enliven these deep laws of nature, particularly silence, it would seem reasonable that a person who gives some time to it might experience that, might go there or be there or in that place. And there are places where this happens just naturally, just the way nature has organized the land. And there are other places. I mean, what happens when you go into one of the great cathedrals in Europe, for example, or a great temple in India? I mean, the silence is so thick you can cut it with a knife, you know? Absolutely. And why? What is it? Well, there's geometry there. Those places are very specifically structured. They're built in order to resonate with silence, if you want, with these deepest laws of nature. That's their purpose. They're homes for silence. And homes are places that not only where silence can reside, but places where silence is given expression, where it rises up, where it's amplified.
So people can be in touch with themselves.
That's right. I mean, that's the whole idea.
Because I read about this in the paper, as well as I read about some other thing that happened a couple years ago with a design that happened in another part of this desert, that somebody mistook it for a UFO design or UFO-made design, and could you elaborate on that?
Well, they didn't. You know, it was a Sri Yantra, which is a specific design that comes from the Himalayas. And that design is said to contain within it, it's actually said to be an instance, not even an example or a symbol, but an instance of very fundamental laws of nature. And it's, to my eye, an extremely beautiful design, and contains within it an enormous amount of intelligence. And in my research on the design, for example, I've run across a number of papers authored by Scottish mathematicians, Russian mathematicians, British, Indian mathematicians, evaluating the mathematics of it, which is highly complex and very, very interesting. But when people saw that design, they didn't know who had made it, and there were no tracks. It was all done without vehicles. And after we finished it, that night it rained, so everything was obliterated, any footprints. Mm-hmm. And when they finally found it and came in there, they couldn't figure out who had made it, because it was so precise. Nobody recognized the design initially as being a Sri Yantra. And so the thought came up, well, it has so much intelligence in it, and order, beautiful orderliness. It must have been made by some higher intelligence. So who could that be but aliens or UFOs?
Crop circles in England.
So in a way it was, I didn't feel bad or anything. I mean, it was like a compliment to the design. Not really to me, but to the design, that people would see that intelligence and then just out of goodwill but ignorance, attribute some higher intelligence to it. Because it is intelligent, the design is, and it is extremely beautiful, and has you know, it's a very powerful design.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a surprise to me that happened.
Yeah, there was a lot of controversy about that for several days here in the paper.
Yeah, I guess there's still people who believe that that I'm a cover-up for the government, and that I really didn't make it, but that I had been paid by the government to say that I made it, so that that will conceal the fact that aliens are doing things or something.
Right.
But whatever.
Yeah. And it appears to me that this is the last ray that, or one of the last rays you have to work on.
Yep. This is the one we started on, and this is the one. This is the east ray. We started from the east when we started from the east and always worked in that direction. And so I figured I'd end up with this. Listen to this one. I'll go get a string. You're going to have to come over this way a little bit.
I wonder if it's picking up past the...
I think it probably is. Oh yeah, I think it probably... It's not very loud, but here comes a breeze. Here. Kind of drop the weight, a little weight down towards me. Just let it rest. That's more like it. Good.
That's the sound of those wires.